Hello, this is Dr. Janet Long, and I am pleased to be with you this afternoon to talk about the power of LinkedIn and how it can complement your professional development as a graduate student. We're going to cover several topics related to LinkedIn today. First, a quick overview of the LinkedIn platform and its benefits. We're going to answer the question, do graduate students really need LinkedIn? We're going to talk about how to optimize your profile so that recruiters are receptive to it. And then we're going to go to the next level and suggest some ways to build your own brand on LinkedIn. And then along with that, how to connect on LinkedIn, how to expand your own network. And then finally, a couple of cautionary notes about using LinkedIn on your computer as opposed to on a mobile app. So let's start by saying that LinkedIn has become the professional platform of choice. More than 500 million users today worldwide in all industries. And whereas LinkedIn in the past might have been a nice to have, today, 94% of recruiters will search for and review candidate profiles. In many cases, they will consult a profile before calling a candidate to interview. And especially in today's virtual world, especially now, connecting on LinkedIn has become the new business card. So it's important, especially now. And then finally, we'll talk about an underutilized opportunity of LinkedIn, that in a free account, you have a chance to showcase projects, your professional portfolio, and to really position yourself as a thought leader within your discipline. So the myth is that graduate students don't need LinkedIn. Maybe you've heard this before. Academia, higher education can feel like its own world at times. And being a graduate student itself can feel isolated. In the past, there might have been a feeling that something like LinkedIn was just too marketing oriented, perhaps only for business students. But I think you'll find today that whatever discipline you're studying in as a graduate student, that most of your faculty are using LinkedIn. And it's not because they're looking for jobs, it's because they're staying up to date about industries and sectors and staying connected with their alumni as well. So we're going to propose that you learn to maximize LinkedIn to build your own professional reputation and, just as importantly, your own network as you complete your graduate degree. We're going to start with what we call a recruiter-ready profile. We're going to talk about everything from your photo to your heading to a summary in the first person to some ways that you can take advantage of opportunities to upload free media, how to ask for recommendations, join professional groups that are relevant to you, and just for a little detail, how to create your own LinkedIn URL that you can also include as a hyperlink on your CV or resume. Well, we'll start with the photo. So as you can see here, we don't want to showcase your dog unless he's the one applying for a job. LinkedIn is that hybrid between personal and professional. So we want the picture just to be of you, no one else in the background. It's not going to be as casual as, let's say, a Facebook or Instagram photo, but we also want it to be approachable. Recruiters say they'd like to look at your photo, so we don't want that gray blob with no photo, but it doesn't have to be overly stiff. You want someone to be able to look at your photo and think, that person seems approachable. I'd like to talk to that person and learn a little more about them. And you can also make the background work for you. You can be strategic. So here are two examples. One of an engineer, and you can see the background of the bridge and the sunset. It's a little inspirational, but also sends a bit of a message about the field. And I'll be sharing some excerpts from my own LinkedIn profile. So Widener's outreach for professional development is built around what we call the inside track. our slogan, Inside Track, Outside Success. So I chose to use that as my own background because I work in the career department. So next, we're going to get to the headline or heading, and we'll ask the question, not to put it too bluntly, does your LinkedIn headline suck? And what we mean by that is it the default headline? Does it just say graduate student at Widener University? Because that's true, but all of you are so much more than that. And you want to use that heading as a way to say a few key things about you, and again, to make your profile instantly searchable by recruiters. So you want to be strategic and use what we call a multi-part heading. So look at the example on the left. Marketer, teamologist, that's a made-up word, but that's okay. And president of, this is a professional organization in Philadelphia. So it's succinct, but it's three distinct parts of this person. The one on the right speaks to some closely held values in addition to professional identity. So structural engineer in the transportation industry at a specific company, and then champion for diversity and inclusion in STEM. So you can use your heading to talk about things that are important to you, even things that might be important in your personal life that could also be appealing to employers. We have a colleague in our own office who is a marathon runner, and that's something that she might include in her profile because it shows a certain amount of resilience and persistence in addition to her professional attributes. The key is that you want to think about your identity as a student, but also more than a student. So a couple of pointers, you want to be aspirational and point towards that. What field are you interested in? And you can literally use as part of your heading the word aspiring. And be specific. So instead of aspiring counselor, if you're interested in the higher ed sector and career counseling like I was, you could have aspiring higher ed career counselor. Most importantly, you want to learn the language. You want to be a bit of a career anthropologist, if you will, and learn the language of the fields that interest you. So review profiles that are relevant to your industry on LinkedIn and look at how experienced professionals in your desired field describe their roles, their areas of specialization, and their settings. Those will give you some important clues. Once you have the heading, you want to move on to the LinkedIn summary. And we have found that that's one of the most underutilized parts of LinkedIn. A lot of students and experienced professionals tend to skip over this part. And it's such a good opportunity because unlike on your resume or CV, where you're writing in the third person and it's factual, but frankly a little dry, we encourage you on LinkedIn to treat the summary section as a personal mission statement, if you will, and to warm it up by writing in the first person. So you can include some thoughts about yourself, your career philosophy, your goals that might not be appropriate to include on a CV or resume. So again, I'm going to bring in my own as an example and just read the first paragraph. Bringing together creative, strategic, and analytical strengths from my background as an executive recruiter, entrepreneur, and corporate marketing director, I created my own Encore career to help students find their place in the workforce and have never looked back. That's my story. Your story will be different, but a couple of keys. Try writing it in the first person. Tell your story from the standpoint of your strengths, your skills, your unique talents, and please no typos. Now we're going to talk a little bit about that portfolio opportunity that I'd mentioned early on. So in a free account, you have the opportunity to upload in many sections of LinkedIn, specifically the summary, experience, and education, anything that is relevant and that would tell your story in more of a visual way. That might be a photo, it could be a link to a blog, it could be an article, it could be a position paper, It could be an article that was written about you, anything that's going to enhance your credibility as an emerging professional in this field. You can have a lot of fun with this. You can always update it. Remember that LinkedIn is fluid. So I'd encourage you to try this. And again, you have a couple of options. You can either upload a document, even a video if you like, or you can just link to a URL. This all goes to what we call building your brand on LinkedIn. And there's a bit of a balance here because you want to position yourself as a thought leader, but also as a strategic follower. So what do I mean by that? So on LinkedIn, like with many social media platforms, you literally have the opportunity to follow people, organizations, nonprofit groups, and you tell a story just by virtue of who you're following because that's visible on your profile. So for example, we're going to look at this section of the profile and I can see under companies that this person is following 2 universities. That might be a graduate and undergraduate, a company, Exelon, Ad Age, maybe that person is interested in a function of marketing, and then bringing in a little bit of personal interest, the 76ers, the team in Philadelphia. So think about it as another chance to tell a composite story. In the same way that we looked at your heading in multiple parts, you can use the organizations, the people you follow as a way to say something about yourself. Now, as to the leadership part of it, you can author and post helpful content and success stories. And there are a couple of ways to do this. There is one that we call a little bit of the humble brag, where you talk about something you've accomplished, but in a modest way and in a sharing way that helps others. So here's one of our alumni, and she writes, "Today I had the privilege of preparing students from Tech Impact for interviews as they start their careers in technology." So she's giving a shout out to students who are studying in a certain area, but she's also recognizing her role in volunteering to help them, which in turn ties into her specialization in placing professionals in the technology industry. So it's a little bit of what we might call enlightened self-interest. Another way to share content, like in the example on the right, could be to share an article, someone else's content and to preface it with a few comments. So in this case, the article was why inclusive leaders are good for organizations and how to become one. And this person is a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so she's sharing content, in this case, from the Harvard Business Review. So it's a very credible source, but then she's adding her own spin to it. Here are some keys about building your brand and engaging with your network on LinkedIn at the same time. So you can like other people's posts and add comments to further a discussion. You can also add your own relevant links and resources to your comments. Again, think about how you're helping others. But you want to be careful not to hijack someone else's post to sell your own product or service, and make sure that you're always looking through the lens of helping and connecting. And a final note, you want to be a little careful about expressing political or controversial opinions unless this is part of the brand in which you would like to build. So we're going to switch gears to the skills and recommendations section, and you may have seen this on LinkedIn. You'll see on the right a list of potential skills for a career counselor. When you set up your LinkedIn profile, and you may have done this already, there is a section where from a drop-down menu, you can literally pull from hundreds and hundreds of skills. And some of these skills can be very technical and specific, like computer programs, or they can be broader based skills like leadership or public speaking. You probably don't want to have 50 of them, but 15 to 20 is fine. And other people, your connections, may endorse you for these skills. Now, I will say as a former recruiter that while We liked to see endorsements. What really gets our attention is recommendations. A recommendation on LinkedIn is like an open reference. So rather than checking that you are talented in a certain skill, one of your connections has literally taken the time to write a reference for you that's visible on your profile. And just as you might when you were interviewing for a job and perhaps an employer was asking you for a list of references, you want to aim for a 360 view of yourself. So for example, if you're looking at a management role, you might want to think about, in addition to people you reported to, someone who you managed who could speak to your specific qualities as a leader or manager. The key with recommendations, like most things in life, is quality over quantity. So better to have 3 sterling recommendations than to have 20 that might just be a couple of words each or sound kind of generic. One more pointer on your skills when you're picking from that drop-down menu, look for keywords that match up with the job descriptions or industry descriptions that interest you. You will have access to this presentation, and we've given you specific instructions on how to solicit a recommendation from your profile. Really easy to do, and you will have the chance to proofread and approve it before posting recommendations to your own profile. So you do have some control there. So our take-home message in terms of building your profile is that, like your resume or CV, your LinkedIn profile is fluid. You can try something out, you can get feedback, you can keep changing it. You want to start with the basics and then establish a presence on LinkedIn. You keep building. So having a static profile will only take you so far. Yes, you want recruiters to be able to look at it, but we want you to use your profile as a way of making professional connections, especially as a graduate student. So I'm going to put out today what we call the 100 Connection Challenge, because building a network on LinkedIn is exponential. Perhaps you've heard of the 6 degrees of separation. So I'm not a math person, but if you have 100 first-degree connections, that will give you probably close to 10,000 second-degree connections. So you want to get to a place where you have a critical mass of connections that are helpful to you and where you can continue to help others. Here are some ideas. You can look to your Widener community. These would be peer scholars in your graduate program, your faculty, advisors, Widener alumni. In your workplace, coworkers, supervisors. This could include volunteer roles, past as well as present. And don't overlook your personal network. A lot of the people you're connected to, let's say on a platform like Facebook, could be appropriate to be connected to on LinkedIn as well, your family, your friends, and your neighbors. So this may sound like a heavy lift, but if you made just 3 connections a day for 1 month, you would be almost there. I mentioned connecting with Widener alumni, and again, we've provided instructions on how to connect through Widener's own alumni tool. So when you go on LinkedIn, you will search for the Widener page, and then you will click on alumni. And what will come up is a dashboard that is searchable of where all our alumni who are on LinkedIn, where they are living, where they work, even what they studied. And you can put in all kinds of filters, write down the graduation years. You can also put keywords in the search bar. You can look for a specific company, and it will bring up profiles of other LinkedIn members. And then you can invite them to connect on LinkedIn. And when you add a note, you'll be able to talk about your alumni status as a point of commonality. And establishing that common connection is so important. We also want to encourage you to join professional groups. There are many groups you can join on LinkedIn for free, whereas you might pay a fee to join the physical organization. And again, you want to be strategic about this. You want to join the organizations that are the most relevant to the fields in which you're studying. and where you'll have the opportunity to not only make connections, but to follow all kinds of discussion groups and to keep learning out of the classroom. The key really is making these connections within your discipline. And for those of you who plan on attending conferences in the future, and these could be virtual conferences as well, keep in mind that there is almost always a roster of conference speakers that's published. You can use LinkedIn to connect with those speakers, either before or after. And you could also connect with other conference participants while memories are fresh. There are some watch outs in terms of sending a LinkedIn invitation. You want to refrain from just sending invitations without any context. You don't want that generic message that comes out, I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn, unless you absolutely know that person. And so you want to personalize the message, tell them how you found them and why you want to connect. Write professionally. You don't want to use your text speak here. Pay attention to tone, style, grammar, and spelling. And for your initial invitation note, you'll have 300 characters. So here's just an example. We connected at the XYZ virtual discussion group last week, and your question about building capacity for nonprofits really resonated with me. I thought we could connect here as well and continue the conversation. So that's just one example. But what that shows is that the person was paying attention. They not only were connected in a discussion group, but remembered what the person they want to connect with spoke about. So the more specific, the more personal you can make it, the greater your chance of having your invite accepted. So finally, just a couple of cautionaries. If you are using LinkedIn from an iPad or from a phone, from any kind of mobile device, you cannot customize an invitation to connect. Once you hit connect, it'll automatically send out that generic default message that we don't want. So you do want to do your connecting from a desktop or a laptop. And please remember, tell them how you found them, why you want to connect. You want to get the message across, like with all types of networking, that there's something in this connection for each of you. Finally, I promised a way to make your LinkedIn URL personal, so it doesn't say linkedin.com 837969. So within this presentation, you will find a quick and easy way to create a custom URL, and you can hyperlink this in your resume or CV. It just makes things really easy. This was just an introduction to LinkedIn, profile building, personal branding, connecting, going to the next level. Our office in career design and development is here to help you. You can email us at careers@widener.edu anytime. We will get back to you to schedule an appointment specific to reviewing your LinkedIn profile and brand building strategy. And finally, please feel free to visit my Widener at your convenience 24/7, and you will find, including this presentation, all kinds of resources on LinkedIn and other professional development information and resources. I hope this has been helpful, and I wish you much success as you all harness the power of LinkedIn.